Good morning and good afternoon, everybody. We're live ahead of qualifying for the Azerbaijan Grand Prix. Zach and I are going to take you through the next hour because we have a lot of lineup decisions to make. But Zach, you're feeling pretty cool this morning, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this one. For me, at least, it's a more relaxed version of myself this weekend. Still a lots to go through. Like, do we actually trust Colapinto? What are the Ferraris actually pace going to be like? Because it's sort of up in the air where everyone is right now. We've had one off with McLaren yesterday being dreadful. Now we've had Ferrari still looking good, but not as fast as they did as yesterday. It's a little bit up in the air, especially the big teams. What's happening?
There's going to be so much chaos this weekend at Baku. You've seen it all throughout free practice. We had drivers off, runoffs into turn one. Pretty much any runoff there was, you saw drivers just trying to right themselves in it. And then in FP3 earlier this morning, we had a lot of wind. There was some dust and dirt on the track. So it's going to be a very interesting weekend. We'll see if that interrupts anybody's qualifying laps and sets up some drivers out of place in the order for the Grand Prix tomorrow. Now, the two big questions I'm probably going to have to answer a lot throughout the hour. Let's hit them one at a time. Number one, where is Terry? Well, if you haven't seen Terry's socials today, he's at the Aston Martin factory getting a really, really cool tour. So we're super jealous of Terry, and he'll be back with us really soon. And then the second thing is, where do I submit my lineups this week? So if you remember, thank you so much for supporting the channel. There's a special link just for you in the member section of this page. But if you're not a member, just throw your lineup in the normal chat. And then as Zach and I are going through questions, we'll answer your lineup questions along with all of our other questions throughout the hour. So don't worry, we're still going to be taking your lineups too. All right. Good morning, Race Maven. Good morning, Rick. A couple of our members are already in bright and early. Let's pull up the times from free practice 3 and just talk about what we saw in the most recent session. So again, McLaren dominating once more. They have a chance to wrap up the constructor's title with a P1 or either a P2 or P3 this weekend, which will be interesting for teams like Zach that could afford a triple McLaren build in the future. Will the gloves be off once they've secured that title? And then, of course, Lewis Hamilton. I'm so happy to see him back up at the top of the grid, P1 in FP2 yesterday, and now P4 in FP3. Zach, what do you think about some of these drivers that we see at the bottom of the top 10? Looks like some of these cost cap gainers that we're hoping for, the likes of Albon, Behrman, Hadjar peaking outside the top 10, all looking pretty good in free practice.
Yeah, I think especially the likes of the Racing Bulls, they always look pretty good. I'm always keeping an eye on them, especially Hadjar. I'm really excited to see what Hadjar can do. It actually looks really interesting with Hadjar and Behrman and Albon. They still look like the best on budget and points, which is phenomenal for them. I'm not too worried about Leclerc in 10th. We've seen what he can do in FP2. I wouldn't be surprised if he does pull it back up and see where he can go in qualifying. Maybe push for a top 3 in qualifying. I don't think he's going to get a pole position this time round. I think it's a little bit too much to ask. But I think definitely the most excited I am for is Max Verstappen. Obviously, splitting the McLarens. I'm very excited to see if he can do anything Monza-esque again, which would be super exciting for the championship and for F1 Fantasy. Because again, Verstappen's not really a driver used at the minute. So if again he does go have a good race weekend again, it could really, really limit the points everyone's getting.
It was an interesting thought we had during Monza because with Piastri starting P3, Verstappen starting at the top, we wondered, was this the time to final fix? Is this gap enough to justify the final fix? And I think it would have been had we played. A lot of us were kicking ourselves for not doing it. And so I think we might see some teams make that pivot if it's, say, Norris, Verstappen, or Verstappen, Norris, then Piastri and P3. It might be time for a mini final fix episode right here. Got a lot of our friends coming into the chat. Hi, Lannister. Hi, Mike. Got some good,
and I
good
think
activity in the
chat. The first poll I've put up actually sort of it says exactly where I'm at this weekend, especially with where is everyone going to be in F1 Fantasy. And so far we have had 50 votes come in. And we have 15% of people going to 4A builds, 50% of people going over to the 4A lights, which is what I like to call the Piastri Albon teams now. And the usual teams, 22%, and only other at 10%. So I'm assuming that's with like a Red Bull or a Mercedes or someone like that. So the split is crazy different at the minute. And also, it does show that I think people are definitely still revving on the side of, okay, no longer a B tier constructor. We've got to bring in the likes of Ferrari. And I mean, Albon, it looks like he could have another great race again.
A lot of great points you made there, Zach. Especially when you think about the tier B constructors, you got to come all the way down to the bottom to find Aston Martin, who was really popular in recent weeks. It looks like Sauber have really fallen off. And this is consistent when we look at the practice debrief sims, when we look at the betting lines. We'll get through that throughout the hour too, but they're all consistent. Sauber and Aston Martin have definitely fallen off the table. I'd only recommend the likes of VCarb if you have a super low budget and you need to build and survive with a Piastri McLaren and maybe another tier A asset or just an Albon lineup. But other than that, not a lot of tier B constructors I'd recommend. Let's cover off some questions in the chat because there are some good ones. Tommaso asks, hello guys, do we like Sainz or Behrman more this weekend? I'm going to come over here to the budget builder because the FP3 sims are now out. I like Behrman just because it's so likely that he's going to gain 0.6 million and set those of us on the border of a 4A lineup right into that team for Singapore. Needs -5 points for it. Sainz on for more points so far, projected to get 6 points. Oh, actually, Behrman's projected to get 6.5. So in the FP3 sims have actually given Behrman a little bit of a boost, and now he's favored for points and cost cap gain. That answers that.
Yeah, I'm happy with that as well because I'm a little bit shocked about how high they're putting Sainz points up, because like I keep seeing that 29% for 15 points, and I think that's crazy. I from what we've seen in the last few races from Sainz, like even if it's not his fault half the time, he's getting into these positions where he shouldn't be. He's not performing as well as Albon. I think actually Albon's been a bit undervalued at the minute with that 7 expected points. But yeah, I think for me, Behrman, from what we've seen so far from Behrman, yes, he's had his moments, but I think most drivers have had their moments so far this weekend. But he's shown the pace. He did well here. It was last year, wasn't it, when he again was back in that Haas. So we know he can perform here. I think it's Behrman over Sainz this weekend.
Yeah, agreed. Behrman made his Haas debut P10 last year here, and he became the first driver ever to make his first 2 points scoring appearances with separate teams, which is an F1 record. You make a great point about Sainz's 15 points. How does that happen? How many overtakes would you have to do, or how high up the grid would you have to finish to get to 15 points? It seems really unlikely unless a minor miracle happens for Sainz. While we're looking at the budget builder, Lannister asked a good question about in the chat. Are we worried about the Leclerc price drop? And we mentioned this on our show to start the week. Leclerc needs 34 or more points to avoid a maximum price drop of 0.3 million. He's only done that once so far this year. And it makes me think back to Rebecca's comment on our video at the beginning of the week. I don't know if Rebecca's here with us this morning, but she'd mentioned the opportunity cost between Leclerc and the likes of Alex Albon. Albon likely to gain 0.6 million, Leclerc likely to lose 0.3 million. It's almost $1 million swing just between those two drivers. So we have to figure out if we're making that move for a 4A lineup. Maybe if we're not quite there yet, if we have to run multiple Alpines, it's time to stick with Albon.
Yeah, it's one of those questions where it's the answers. There is actually no right or wrong answer depending on who you're talking to. Because like for me, it's the sort of thing, anyone with high budgets, when you're not really looking at Albon as the comparison anymore, you're looking at, okay, when I'm trying to get over to the likes of a Norris or someone, what are they looking at? And that's why I'm quite comfortable with Leclerc, because Leclerc, Norris, they're probably going to go down similar in value. So they're evening out there. Whereas I can see someone who's still pushing for budget around 127, 128, 100% why Albon's definitely looks like the better option. It really does just depend on whether you're still going for the budget or not. Because at the end of the day, Leclerc will probably get around 25 to 30 points. Albon probably won't get as many as that. So the points are still in Leclerc's favor. So it all comes down to, are you happy with your team and the high budget side, or are you still going for that budget increases?
And you'll see throughout the show that Zach and I are in very different positions on this with our budget. So hopefully we can handle everybody's question based on our own experience too. I haven't talked about likes yet. If you haven't liked the video yet, please make sure you do it. We like to hold our lineups hostage until we get to at least 50 or so. So if you could hear me, please hit the like button. It does a lot of good for the channel. FanAmp YouTube is now up over 15,000 subscribers. So thank you all. We're growing so fast and it's going great this year.
Oh, here's a question from Marta for using Limitless. Just what is the best team for it? I'd assume it's the same. I think my team hasn't changed Limitless wise throughout this weekend, where it looks like definitely Piastri Norris need to be in there. Verstappen needs to be in there. I guess it then comes down to, do you want to go Hamilton Leclerc, or are you a little bit worried about Leclerc? I don't think I'm worried about Leclerc enough. Or do you want to split up, but also then Antonelli looks a little bit better than Russell so far this weekend, potentially. But I think if I was going for Limitless, I would actually go triple Ferrari, triple McLaren, Verstappen.
I like triple Ferrari in a Limitless build this weekend. Let's give Hamilton a shot. I think they're looking really strong. And Hamilton had some really good comments after practice yesterday. Usually sounds a little bit downbeat after FP2 says we have a lot of things to fix or that he's uncomfortable with the car. He sounded really great yesterday. So I do trust them. And speaking of what people sound like, did you hear George Russell on the radio? Sounds like he's been gargling rocks. So no wonder he missed media day on Thursday. So hopefully he's back in good spirits for tomorrow.
Oh, Lannister asks another good question of asking, he's comparing Russell with Leclerc for points and budget. So if you're doing that, because Russell would get most likely a 0.1 increase, it's probably going to be around 5 to 10 points difference between Russell and Leclerc. Again, it would most likely be, so it'd be a 0.4 swing. And I think, especially at this stage of the season, if you're looking at Leclerc versus Russell, with those high budgets, it's all about the points. How many races have we got after this? 7? I don't think those small changes are going to be drastic enough, considering if you set up the rest of your team right, you're still going to be getting Hadjar 0.6 million, potentially a Bortoletter 0.2 or 0.6 million, Colapinto 0.2 million. All of these drivers are still going to be going up elsewhere, and that's where you can make your money. You don't have to focus so much on those tiny differences between the A-tier drivers. At least that's where my head is at now.
And so, Zach, going from there, Federico asked in the chat, Russell or Albon? How far does it go before we don't have George Russell on our teams?
Oh, again, this one, it's like the middle ground now, isn't it? I guess because Russell, I don't think is going to score crazy points this weekend. I wouldn't be surprised if he actually gets very similar to what he's got the last two, 19 points. That sounds about probably where he would be this race weekend. And then Albon, even though Albon has performed really well in the last few race weekends, I do think he's overperformed points-wise. So for me, it probably would be around more likely 12-ish points. So let's say there's around a 7-point difference between Russell and Albon. I guess it comes back to that same thing I was talking about. Are the points more useful? And I guess if I was using my same analogy with Leclerc, yes. However, the slight difference is, and I will say the slight difference is, those teams have less budget. So I don't know what the rest of the teams are like, because usually the Russell teams will have worse B-tier drivers as well, trying to fit in Russell. So if it's that sort of situation where you're no longer getting Hadjar points up, no longer getting Behrman points up, and you're going like double Alpine, then potentially it's worth keeping Albon.
Yeah, that's a long and short one. I was going to say it depends. If you already had Albon on your team and you're saving a transfer, I'd pick Albon. If you're short on budget, you need the 0.6 million from Albon, and you could be running potentially double Alpine with Russell, then I'd stick with Albon. But if you already have Russell on your team, you have a bigger budget, and it's do I move to Albon? No, then I keep George Russell. All right. Up over 50 likes now. Thank you to everybody for hearing my call to action on that. Race Maven is all over the place this week. Can't make any decisions and doubting everyone. I think that's partly because we're so worried about DNFs. We have rookies on a track that's got one of the tightest sequence of turns on the whole calendar. We saw a lot of yellow flags throughout all the free practice sessions. So you're just trying to set the lineup, cross your fingers, hope you avoid the inevitable DNF or two, and that your midfield back marker drivers just survive those DNFs, gain 2 or 3 points, and they can get you some good cost cap gains as well.
Yeah, I think that's the main thing, isn't it? Keeping an eye on the B tier drivers, because I don't think it's going to be a high scoring B tier driver race. Just from what we've seen as well, McLaren look fast, Ferrari look fast, Mercedes look fast, Verstappen looks fast. That's the top 7 basically covered now. Where does everyone fit in? Unless we have a sort of driver like I don't know, like a Bortoletto or a Hulkenberg qualifies 19th. Actually, Hulkenberg loves to do that, qualifying low and then finishing 11th. That's the only real way I could see a B tier driver scoring like 12 plus points this weekend.
I see Stewart's question in the chat. Do I take a -10 to get to a 4A build, or do I use my wild card? He has 135 million in budget. This is your time, Stewart. I'd say slam that wild card, get into the 4A, because you can probably afford a really good 4A lineup with it. I'd get right in there and start applying that pressure, because so many of our teams, including mine, have to wait until at least Singapore, if not for Coda. So start building that advantage.
Yeah, and Stewart's just mentioned that he has 135 million in budget, 100% wild card over. That is 100%. You're in your end game team there. You will not need that wild card for anything more realistically.
All right, just to show some other stats that have refreshed in the last hour or so, looking at the betting lines for this week, because that can help us decide if we're on the fence between one driver or another. I want to go down to the bottom to start, because you can see Alpine, Aston Martin, and Sauber all dropped so much. And that's definitely reinforcing some of the things we saw in the FP3 sims from F1 Fantasy Tools. Colapinto and Gasly, if you're starting them, it's to protect budget because they can't lose any value, and you hope they survive a few DNFs, gain a few points, and maybe get 0.2 or even 0.6 million. But you're not hoping that they contend for a top 10 finish. And of course, if you've got Aston Martin in your lineup from a few races ago when we had so much faith in them, that faith is pretty much gone now. We got to see some more out of Alonso and Stroll before we trust Aston Martin as a constructor. Coming up a little bit, you could see this gap between Sainz and Albon. Good news for Albon that he's now behind Mercedes. I think this is P8 or so. So good news for him and getting that 0.6 million, because his target's pretty reasonable this week. And then Behrman and Lawson, if you're looking for some fringe drivers to get you 0.2 or 0.6 million, consider these V-carb guys too.
I think that about sums up where my head is at, to be fair. It correlates quite nicely over to F1 Fantasy, yeah. Where maybe I think Ocon could be maybe a bit above Sainz. I think FP3 didn't do him the service that he probably should have got. But like, if we look completely at the top, Norris, Piastri, Verstappen, Leclerc, Hamilton. That's the Limitless team right there we were talking about. Behrman, Albon, Hadjar, all in the top 10 of those as well. Again, points and budget, what we've been talking about, those are like the big guys. I think the standout one there is Lawson. I'm not too overexcited about Lawson this race weekend, just because, again, I don't see a big difference in the points he'll score over a Bortoletto or a Hadjar or a Behrman or anyone like that who looks just as good for budget as well.
You mentioned Bortoletto a second ago. Mike asked in the chat, how do we feel about Bortoletto going off the track in practice? I saw that incident too, but at this point, I just have to come to peace with the fact that guys on my team probably had an incident somewhere in free practice, because there were so many of them. Verstappen went off, Norris went off, Hamilton went off. So this will happen to probably most of the grid. If it happened in FP3, it was probably because of the wind or the dust that was on the track, or because they're trying to get those C6 tires into a window where they could use them eventually. We saw back in Canada when the C6 made its debut this season, we had drivers in Q3 running the mediums because they didn't trust the softs. So I think they're just trying to figure out, can we get a fast lap time, at least in qualifying, or if you have a late red flag in the Grand Prix for a sprint to the finish with those tires, can we get them in the window? But we saw some drivers struggling with that.
That sort of sums up this entire race weekend, doesn't it? Where it's like everyone's had their moments. It's Baku. And it's F1 Fantasy. There will be people who get unlucky this weekend with a DNF, and it could come from anyone. I know it's more likely to come from someone like a Colapinto or a Who else is quite prone to this? Like a Lawson, someone like that. But at the end of the day, if one of them crashes into someone else, like a Sainz or an Albon, it's just the luck of the draw. And sometimes that's just how it goes in F1 Fantasy, which especially this weekend looks like it's going to be the case. I think most people will get a DNF or so.
Yeah, I'm due to avoid a DNF. I had some bad luck with Hulkenberg and Alonso going out at Monza, so I just need to hope my guys hang it together. But when you see my lineup, you'll see I might be asking for a DNF with some of my choices. All right, I'm going to flash over the first lineup here. So this is one of our member lineups. This is Rick's team. Rick's got his lineup on screen because he submitted it through our member portal. He's leaning toward the McLaren Ferrari option. So his current team looks like this. One transfer, Alonso to Behrman. You're just going to go from minus 0.6 million to plus 0.6 million. Keep the same team and carry a transfer. Or minus 10 to get a piece of that Albon top 10 action. But it's a minus 10 and you bring on Mercedes. So I think that might be a little too far over the line for me because the difference between Albon and Sainz is probably even less than 10 points. And the difference between Ferrari and Mercedes is much less than 10, much more than 10 points. And you lose that transfer that you carry over?
Yeah, I would say as well, at around 120 million, sadly, I think the 4A builds aren't going to happen this season. They might happen, but you'd have one, maybe 2 race weekends to use it. So at the end of the day, I wouldn't take a minus 10 to go over to Albon, which I think from the looks of things, that minus 10 looks like more of a budget gainer minus 10, which I just think is too late in the season for someone around 115 to 120 million. So I agree. I think the middle one for me is my favorite. You got Bortoletto, looks good for going up in price. Hadjar the same, Behrman the same. They've looked good this race weekend as well. Sainz, I'm not too keen on, but I'm happy to stick with him for now. And of course, then into Singapore, where I do actually think having 3 transfers is going to be so vital because it's a night race. Mercedes tend to do well, potentially at a night race. I think there could be a little bit of a mix-up, especially with BTA drivers, constructors heading into that race weekend. So just having an extra transfer could be huge.
It's going to be another interesting week, and we've got a nice break here to think about it between Baku and Singapore. Do we have any other lineups? I just want to check and make sure we haven't missed any of our other members, and then we'll get back to the chat. Oh, here's
There
Race Maven. Ooh, a little final fix.
Oh, similar budget as well.
So look at this. We've got Norris, McLaren, Ferrari. And then what do we do? It's an interesting question. By taking Norris in one of the most expensive assets in the game, you could final fix into anybody, which is fair.
I see, yeah.
Need budget and points to get back to first in my league. So this is a situation where you're not just in the global league trying to move upstream with the rest of us. You're chasing someone that probably has a Piastri, McLaren, Ferrari lineup, and you got to do some damage somewhere else.
See, this is the sort of budget, again, where I'm happy for someone to go for Lando Norris, because at the end of the day, increasing budget is no longer the most necessary thing to do. So I'm happy. I get the whole reason for actually doing Lando for the final fix potential of whoever gets it, which also is a good move. But be careful on that, because we might see someone like a Lando be second or third. And then I think, unlike Monza this time round, especially if it's Leclerc, sadly for Ferrari fans, if it was Leclerc in pole, I wouldn't expect anyone to final fix over to him. So I think that sets you up quite nicely, having Norris 2 times for that differential boost. Considering at 120 million, you've really got to find anything to try and fight these big builds now.
Agreed. I like it. You might not even need to use the final fix if Norris qualifies on pole. He'll just run all the way through, then you get the differential there without using the chip. All right. William asked in the chat, is it worth minus 10 to swap Alonso to Behrman or Hadjar? So I think this question comes from, you're probably going to get more points from Behrman and Hadjar. You're going to go from a minus 0.6 to a plus 0.6. That feels about right for me.
And normally that 100% is. I would ask, what sort of budget are you working with? Because again, we come back to this situation of, I think if the budget's less than 123 to 125, then just keep an eye on those points, because I don't think the budget's going to come in quick enough for those big builds to help. And then we're looking at, okay, points wise, just the points. a -10 for Alonso to a Bearman is a negative in points, 100%. So just keep an eye on them. I can't stress that enough. Where if the budget isn't there anymore, budget building doesn't matter as much.
Zach, I'm seeing a crazy lineup in the chat. I want to get your opinion on it. Ziggy
Oh,
Lippens. What do you think of Piastri, Norris, Kimi, McLaren, RB? I imagine that's V car.
oh,
That
so
would be
that's a proper.
that's a huge budget to get into triple McLaren and Antonelli.
That's a
So
big differential team, yeah.
so you probably have enough budget where you don't care if Antonelli is going to lose 0.6 million.
Mm-hmm.
Probably be offset by RB gaining 0.6 million.
Ooh.
And then it's just triple McLaren.
You know what? I like it as a differential. I mean, if there was going to be one race where Kimi was like looking better than he has been for most of the season so far, it has been here so far. So if you want the differential, yes. Do I think it's gonna outscore a normal lineup? I still don't think so. Just because I think Racing Bulls won't get more than 30 points as a constructor this race weekend, whereas Ferrari are going to get double that probably. And then I think the difference between the likes of an Antonelli compared to an Albon, or a Norris compared to a Leclerc, or whoever, what's going on, the differences there, I don't think it adds up to the difference that you're losing from Racing Bulls to a Ferrari.
It's a very interesting team. I've never seen anything like that one before. We are at 63 likes. If we get to 75, I'll flash my lineup a little bit early because I just locked it in. Terry will never let me live it down if I don't get to 75 likes without it. Please hit that like button.
Yes, I have. I can say I have locked in my team as well, scheduled.
We'll see what Zach has, but I think it's going to be boring and something that makes us all jealous. So
yeah.
Speaking of big budgets, we got Grant in the chat, 133.8 million. Still don't want to pull the trigger on 4A this week because Leclerc is still going to lose some budget. Going to go for the template light, I think. Piastri, Albon, Bortoleto, Bearman, Hadjar, McLaren, Ferrari. Perfectly fine. I think that will work. I would also think too about how many transfers you have and then how many you'll need to get into the Leclerc or Russell build, whoever's looking better for Singapore. Would you need to make 2 transfers or 3? If you only have 2 transfers going to that race, if you lose Albon and most expensive after that's probably Bearman, do you have enough for Leclerc and a back marker driver? Would you have to make 3 moves and then take the -10? So just think about that as you set your lineup. If it's 1 transfer this week, so you avoid a -10 next week.
I think that is the main gist of it as well, especially for anyone who's trying to get out of like an Alonso type driver, where I've looked at it and it's like just keep an eye on if you need free transfers, because even in my team, which will we know it's a 4A build anyway, but just some changes don't seem necessary. So like if you're thinking of changing a Bortoleto to a Bearman or a Hadjar, I don't think that's necessary. Whereas if it was like a Lawson or a Sainz, then you could. But it just make sure you see what the points and the budgets are looking like. Keep an eye on all of that and make sure you just make sure that if you need, like you said, if you need that extra transfer, keep it. Because I'm telling you 100%, the B tier drivers are going to change quite a bit around. Bearman's going to be no longer usable if he has a standard weekend here. A lot of the lower drivers, like a Gasly, might come into play, like a Sainz. A lot of different drivers that people don't have in their teams. Mercedes might be coming back. People might be bringing them in. So, yeah, free transfers seems like a very much needed thing for Singapore.
All right, the chat has come through. We're up over 90 likes now. So without further ado,
Wow.
let me show you my lineup, because unlike Zach's team, I had a lot of decisions to make this week. Piastri, McLaren, Ferrari, you knew this was happening. I brought Albon and Hadjar over from last week, but I had to get rid of Hulkenberg and Alonso. Bearman makes a lot of sense because he's most likely to gain 0.6 million. But it's Colapinto and rolling over 6 million that I had to give a lot of thought to. And this goes back to the lineup advice we just gave a moment ago. I can afford the likes of Carlos Sainz or Liam Lawson, one of these guys that might be in the 5 to 6 million range, but then I can't afford Leclerc, and in some cases, not even George Russell, depending on how things ship out between Albon and Bearman next week. I only have 2 transfers. So if I move these 2 guys out, I would have to have a 3rd transfer, and a -10 to get into a 4A lineup. So this lineup gives me my only shot at a 2 transfer 4A build moving forward. And even to do that, I might have to have some tomfoolery with my final fix just to avoid that -10, depending on how the cards fall this week.
I think that pretty much like is a really good team note just to show exactly where our heads at with what we've been talking about this entire stream so far. Where it's like for your team, it makes sense to go down to a Colapinto because you are going for that 4A build. You're at what's your budget?
128.6.
Yeah, a 120 around 128. You know you're heading to that 4A build. Whereas the funny thing is, someone with how much 6 million did you say an offset of?
Yeah. It'll be about
About
6
someone with
minutes.
around 122-ish million could afford the exact same team. But then it's such a different question to ask because it's not heading into a 4A team. So then it's like, well, hang on a second. What if we just look at actually bringing him some better B tier drivers while we're at it because we're not near it? And I think that is the best thing about F1 Fantasy with everyone being at different budgets, because you can have the exact same lineup with two different people and the outcomes are completely different.
And I get it. I'm asking for heartache with Colapinto. I'm keeping the hopium alive. That P8 start here last year. Maybe he has some good experience around Baku. One of the few drivers that didn't end up in the runoff area in free practice, which means I'm definitely asking for it. But that's what I'm looking at for this week. I'll flash it back up to the budget builder. Give it a few more minutes for Zach to make his post. We'll take some questions in the chat. Build the suspense to his big budget lineup that's coming up soon.
I will say I saw a question from Trevor, which I thought was quite interesting. And I know my answer to this, but Trevor asked, would it be worth dropping, well, not dropping, but changing to a Verstappen Mercedes build? So instead of Leclerc and Ferrari, Verstappen Mercedes.
Verstappen Mercedes.
Because Verstappen has looked pretty good.
It's interesting, too, from a price perspective, that Verstappen's more likely to gain, Leclerc more likely to lose. You could get about $500,000 in budget out of him. Oh, but those points.
Mm.
Leclerc about on par with Verstappen, and then will Mercedes really outscore Ferrari with how good Lewis is looking compared to Antonelli? Ferrari's got their mojo back with the pit stops. I think this could be a 2-stop race with the softer tires that gives Ferrari more bites at the apple of having a 2-second or sub 2-second pit stop.
It's very much. I think in simplest terms, it comes down to budget over points, doesn't it? Again, this dilemma that we're always in. Verstappen, Mercedes, you're going to get a better budget, of course, but it looks like Ferrari, Leclerc would get you more points this weekend. It's going to be close, though.
Just saw a question pop up about Limitless. I'm all for Limitless this week. Again, trying to use it as soon as you can. I agree the top 6 are looking really clean this week. And even if you have an example where a driver gets caught out by a late yellow flag like Norris did last year, that Lewis started this race from the pit lane last year, they can recover in the faster car. That big run to start the race coming out of turn 16 all the way down to turn 1, plenty of opportunities for overtakes there. And I think we'll see some of the faster drivers to qualify low make up places that way.
I can tell you my team is live. It is.
All right.
It is.
Let's see what we got, Zach.
You're gonna be so surprised.
Oh, look what we have here.
Different.
It's the mighty version of my team. Leclerc over Albon, and then it looks like you've got Bortoletto over Ollie Behrman.
Yes.
Was that a cost cap limitation thing, or do you have some inside scoop here?
I can afford it. I can afford to go Bortoletto to Behrman, but it's what I've been talking about this stream where I'm like, I think I prefer having that extra transfer heading into Singapore because I really think if there's one track that Mercedes, two tracks that Mercedes would come back in pace, it'd be Singapore and Vegas.
Vegas, absolutely.
So I think coming into Singapore, it's going to be important to have an extra transfer. And I knew I wanted to get rid of Lawson. So I went Lawson down to Colapinto. Pretty much straightforward. I can see Lawson and Colapinto in an ideal world where there's no DNFs. I think both of them are just as likely to DNF, to be fair, that they'll get similar points. And then Hadjar, my guaranteed increase in budget. And the rest of it's okay, because at the end of the day, I was only 0.1 million off a Piastri, Norris, McLaren, Mercedes team. So, like I've been talking about, if your budget's high enough, you don't really need to focus exactly on where the points are coming from like a Leclerc, from a Ferrari. You just have to have one or two good budget builders in that team and you're fine. Well, at least that's where my head was at.
This is the benefit of having a huge budget like you do,
Mm.
Zach. It doesn't matter if Leclerc loses 0.3 million. It doesn't matter if Behrman has a lower threshold for 0.6 million than Bortoleto, because you have plenty and you can still keep climbing through the likes of Hadjar and even Colapinto this week.
Yeah, like I only need Bortoleto to go up 0.2 million. That would be a nice treat. Just don't go down 0.6 million, so don't crash.
Zach, I want to vote on your poll while I'm here. How many crashes will we see in qualifying for Baku? I'm going to say 2.
Oh,
and I'm right in the mix with everyone else. Fantastic.
Oh, we're gonna get so many.
DVS, thank you for sharing that we have 100 likes. Terry will be proud of us.
He's gonna be over the moon with that. Yeah.
Yes, I'm sure he's already buzzing after visiting Aston Martin today. Hopefully, he has some secrets as to why Aston Martin are at the bottom of the grid this week. Let's see. Question in the chat about Tier B drivers, these cheap guys. Gasly, Colapinto, Bortoleto. But that driver will be on my team for the next couple of weeks. So looking this week and beyond, who would you prefer? I'm thinking my first guess would be Zach's boy Bortoleto in this case, because he's dropping a 0. He has a decent week this week. All of a sudden, his price gain target will be decent. And he's been the steadier driver compared to him and Colapinto, and even Gasly. He's crashed when we've needed him the most a few times this season. So I'd be happy with Bortoleto there.
Yeah, I think considering I don't have much faith in Colapinto or Gasly. I know we both have Colapinto. It's more of a he's there because he's there. So yeah, I think Bortoleto out of those 3 definitely is the only one as well where I could look into a race weekend every time and go, well, he could still actually score pretty good. I look at Gasly and Colapinto and think they're not scoring more than 5 points.
A couple of questions about Limitless and who to bring in. Just to recap, I would go right up here. And then Zach and I would rule out Russell, go with triple Ferrari. So Piastri, Verstappen, Norris, Leclerc, Hamilton, McLaren, Ferrari.
Yeah.
Our friend Simon is in the chat. And Zach, this is another one of these questions about, do I go for points, transfers, cost cap gains? Would you bring in Behrman instead of Lawson, or save a transfer and keep Lawson? Now, this is important about your cost cap, because the gap between Behrman up here and Lawson down here, that's 1.2 million. Maybe is the likes of Zach can afford that, but I couldn't. So
this is where it gets really hard, because like I think Bortoleto to Behrman was an easy no-go, because Bortoleto still looks half okay for the budget, but Lawson 49% to go down 0.6 million. I think they're being quite harsh on him, 49% on that side. But I talk about how important this extra transfer is, and I really do believe it is. But Lawson, 9 points, he needs 0.2 million. Realistically, he would only go down minus 0.2. Here's the thing. I'm going to think about this long term. You might have to take a minus 0.2 this weekend with Lawson, and it might hurt. However, think about it long run. Where would that leave you in Singapore? Because that means instantly you've only got 1 transfer to make, because you've got to get rid of Behrman. Unless Behrman gets like 20 points, you've got to get rid of Behrman. So then where do you go with the rest of your team? Unless everything went perfect, you're good. So you can risk it and go that way if you want to go with Behrman. However, the safe route would be to keep Lawson. He's probably going to be someone we'd want to bring in if he gets around 6. If he gets around 6 points again, if he's got 6 plus 6 at 5.1 million, he'll be a half decent asset to hold. So then you've also got that situation of then you have free transfers, and you technically you have an extra one because you're not fussing about with Lawson. So yeah, it really comes down to your preference of, do you want those guaranteed safe transfers that you can make, or do you want to risk it for that chocolate biscuit and go for only 1 transfer basically heading into Singapore?
This is the point of the season where you have to think 2 and 3 races ahead. So we got to do some long division on this one. Good call out, Zach. Reese wants to know, what's the quadruple A tier budget threshold? If I had to ballpark it, I'd say it's high 120s, low 130s. You might be able to get into a double Alpine lineup with We can do this together.
I guess it depends on where we're calling the 4A build. Are we talking about a McLaren Ferrari build? Because technically you could go McLaren Mercedes Piastri Russell, which is a 4A build, but it's not like everyone agrees it's not really a 4A build anymore. So if we're talking about Ferrari terms, I think the cheapest one was Piastri Russell McLaren Ferrari, about 129.6 or something like that. And then with Leclerc, it'd be about 130.2.
I've managed to not get this right. What have I done? Piastri, Russell, the 3 cheapest drivers. I cranked the budget all the way up, and I don't see anything. But I think you're right, Zach, in the 129s
Yeah,
or so.
I think it's about...
I could afford it if I could afford it if I made a ton of transfers and had double Alpine, and I'm at 128.6. Oh, question from Hakan. You were the first person I thought of when Terry texted us that he wasn't going to make it today. I said, oh no, Hakan's going to be so disappointed. Opinion on Sainz. I'm happy with him. I think he's right in the middle in terms of points and cost cap gain. It is a bit of a risk because if it's under 5 points, he's going to lose 0.6 million. So we've got to be careful with Sainz. A point that Zach made earlier is calling out his 0.6 million threshold. I don't think there's a 30% chance he's going to score 15 points. He needs driver of the day, fastest lap, something really outrageous, because I don't think he has that many positions gained.
I think Sainz is one of those drivers where if you've got him from last race weekend, you can just keep him. But I don't think he's high on my list for making any transfers out. I think it's close between that with someone like Lawson as well, potentially, if you wanted to do something like that. I think those two are like the ones people are looking at with that situation. And then you got the likes of Hulkenberg, Alonso, Stroll, and Ocon. I think everyone, if you have them, you move away from them, even if you don't get that extra transfer heading into Singapore. I think that's the gist of it. Oh, and technically Tsunoda. And not much has been talked about Antonelli, but for one race weekend, it has to be a massive differential.
I need to see something from him. Just a couple of weeks in a row where it looks like he's come to grips with that Mercedes before I can totally invest in him. Question in the chat about 4A lineup. Who's the last driver in your team, Gasly or Colapinto? For me, I'm a bit biased because I've leaned on Gasly almost 3 times this season. I had to make a late change on this show for Gasly, and he's DNF'd or DNS'd all 3 times. So I could just never recommend him again. Colapinto slightly more likely to gain value because if you're running an Alpine, you're probably right on that border where you could use 0.6 million. So give me Colapinto.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's Colapinto purely because I don't trust both of them. At the end of the day, like Colapinto, we know he's quite crash prone. But at the end of the day, he still actually has only had 1 -20 since coming back. So I'm not excited about his points. He's not a great driver for points, but Gasly's the exact same. So it's sort of like I see them as equal in the terms of they're both subpar assets to hold. But because of that, Colapinto's lower threshold needed makes him the better asset.
Fantastic. We were talking about Tsunoda earlier, and there was some movement in Formula 2 earlier this weekend that predicts that Tsunoda's seat is probably going to be filled by a new driver next season. So Nicolas Soloff, who we interviewed in Formula 3, he's a Red Bull junior. He was promoted to Campos for this weekend. Campos is typically the F2 team that supplies drivers to the Red Bull team. They currently have Pepe Marti and Arvid Lindblad, and this suggests that Lindblad's going to make the jump to V-Carb, and in all likelihood, you're going to see Isaac Hadjar in that Red Bull seat next year. So Yuki's definitely fighting to keep his F1 dreams alive.
Actually, this is an interesting question from Hugo, asking about Behrman's performance in the rain. I'm pretty sure last time I checked, has the rain gone up?
I don't think so. I think the rain you saw in the forecast for today had passed.
It's not too much, yeah.
It was prior to FP3, which is why the rubber got washed off. I don't see any for tomorrow. Garnek, you should not keep Stroll.
I would say for everyone, again, I'll repeat it for everyone. If you have Alonso, Hulkenberg, Stroll, Ocon, I'll throw in Sonoda as well. Why not? I don't think many people have him, but throw in that. You're most likely going to want to change them about unless you're going for a huge differential again, which I was talking about, where you're at like 115, 120 million. You're not going for those 4A builds. Then you could keep one of them, but I wouldn't recommend having all of them. Those are like the steer clear drivers for any normal team.
Sri wants to know double V carb. I'd be okay with that. Obviously, Hadjar is going to be on all of our teams, so not a huge change there. Lawson, I would say it depends if you had Liam on your team last time or if you're using a transfer to get into Lawson. I would say you're probably safer with one of the Alpines with their price floor situation, signs with his points opportunity. But if you bring in Lawson, you're thinking about like what Zach said, I want to save an extra transfer in case Mercedes are on the pace for Singapore. I'm fine with Lawson too.
Ooh, here's an interesting lineup. Piastri, Verstappen, Bortoleto, Hadjar, Behrman, McLaren, VCarb, or Piastri, Albon, Bortoleto, Hadjar, Behrman, McLaren, Red Bull. So no Ferrari involved.
Interesting.
I think my mind would be the second one because I just think constructor over every time. Purely for racing Red Bull's points over Racing Bulls, but it does bring it more close into contention because technically most of Red Bull's points will be from Verstappen. So it's a little
Red
bit
Bull
different.
have been okay lately, in spite of Sonoda. Obviously, the Monza score is inflated by the Verstappen win, but even when Max isn't winning in every race, they have been okay. So yeah, I like the second lineup too.
Reese asked quite a funny question. Who to avoid in terms of likely DNFs? Honestly, you could put up a thing for everyone.
Likely DNF. Sometimes there are betting lines on this, but I didn't see any for this week. It's usually the rookies in no particular order.
Ooh, and talking about no negative as well. We haven't talked much about no negative. It's not really been a chip on my mind because we've used it, to be fair. But it wouldn't be a terrible weekend to try it out. Yeah.
No negative brings back bad memories for both of us. I would be tempted to hold on to no negative just in case we have another properly wet weekend. Obviously, Brazil stands out using it for a sprint weekend. To get it totally right here, you would have to pick inevitably the 2, maybe 3 drivers that end up DNFing. So there's a chance you hit right into the sweet spot where you might have picked a team, use no negative, and then none of them do DNF, and you only save 2 or 3 points, like Zach and I did in Spa.
Oh wow! Hello, we've had a super chat.
Yes, Jeffrey has lit up my whole screen now, so let's pay attention to this. Piastri, Leclerc, Bortoleto, Sainz, Colapinto. Do I go with Sainz, Bortoleto to Gasly, Hadjar?
Ooh.
So you're looking at a little bit extra for cost cap with Hadjar.
Yeah. Oh, you know what? In my head, my thinking is Sainz, Bortoleto, Gasly, Hadjar probably going to score similar points. I think Hadjar is a better asset than both Sainz and Bortoleto, but Gasly is worse than both of them. So you've got the best and the worst versus the middle ground. But then you've also got the Hadjar going up 0.6 million.
Why don't you go to Sainz to Hadjar and call it even? Save a transfer.
Ooh, if they could afford it, 100%, yeah.
Because it's Sainz, Colapinto to Gasly, Hadjar. Colapinto and Gasly are even. Hadjar and Sainz. Yeah, I imagine you have to making that.
Oh yeah, not enough budget. Yeah,
Hadjar. So yeah, I would do save the transfer, Sainz to Hadjar, assuming you have that extra 1.2 million kicking around.
I've seen a question as well for Lawson to Sainz as well. Lawson to Sainz is very much a what's the term called? Like nothing changes. Very, very similar driver change. So I don't see a reason to waste a transfer on that, especially if it's one that could get you an extra transfer next race weekend. Yeah, lateral change.
Our friend Juicebox wants to know, Zach, Sainz, Colapinto, Lawson. You keep Sainz, you carry a transfer. or Colapinto and Lawson if you want to stem off, I assume, the potential price loss from signs.
Ooh.
This is a close one. I don't think I don't feel so inspired by Colapinto that I would lose a transfer carryover and Signs' points to bring him in. Lawson isn't any more likely to gain value than Signs and with fewer points. So I'm thinking roll with Signs.
Yeah, I'm happy to roll there. Just because also potentially Colapinto, I think if you're going into Colapinto as well, it would be nice to have an extra transfer because let's get real. If Colapinto goes up 0.6 million, which he could, he's probably going to be looking risky to not go up anymore in Singapore. So we might be wanting to get rid of him again and maybe go over to a Gasly from that point. So I'd say, yeah, if you have Colapinto, try have free transfers available.
I think that covers off Yash's question that just came in on similar drivers a moment ago. Frederico's got another interesting one. Piastri, Leclerc, Sainz, Bortoletto, Hadjar, McLaren, Mercedes. So similar to the Verstappen Mercedes, but with Leclerc on 4 straight poles and a Ferrari that's looked really good. Would you change anything or save a transfer?
Ooh.
This is interesting because you might want to have Mercedes on your team for Singapore
Yeah.
if they're already on your team. Okay, so I'm on top of my league.
I points wise, if we break it down to the basics of points wise, it's probably better to try to get in the Ferrari as a constructor.
Yeah,
But
so that's what he says at the end here. I'm on top of my
yeah,
league, and I could do Mercedes for Ferrari and Charles for Albon, which if you were in first, maybe you do just to smother everybody else in your league who probably couldn't do better than that, and then pivot back up. You just lose the flexibility of the transfers for Singapore.
mm, mm, I that is a really tough one because you have to be so focused on having that team exactly what it's like. So you know what? I'm actually going to say stick with the Piastri, Leclerc, McLaren, Mercedes. I'm going to go with that purely because if you have the money to be doing all of that sort of stuff, then you have money to change around for Singapore. And potentially, if you're stuck at Piastri, McLaren, Ferrari for Singapore, it could hurt you.
I'm doing the speed math in my head, and it's about even. Difference between Leclerc and Albon is 17-ish points. You come down here, difference between Ferrari and Mercedes, that's 24 points, difference of about 7 between them, and then the cost of carrying the transfer. So it is all right about the same there. Lannister asked, is it raining? Is anyone watching the broadcast today?
That's what I'm about to get up. I'm about to get it up, hopefully.
Let's get the last 7 minutes. Let's get some chaos.
I swear, if it starts raining now, that'll send me over the edge, man.
Race Maven, thanks so much for your support. Good luck to you too. I think with Colapinto on my team, I'm going to need it.
Yes, everyone, make sure to lock in your lineups. We do not want to be forgetting about them.
Fingers and toes crossed that everyone survives the installation lap.
Oh, another super chat from Race Maven. Yeah. Lovely jubbly.
Scott, we are reviewing lineups. Feel free to just throw it in the chat. So for people who are members, we have it up on the screen. But for people who aren't members, you can just throw it in the chat and we can knock it out here.
Triple McLaren Mercedes. The Lannister asks, triple McLaren Mercedes signs Colapinto Lawson versus my team. Now, I think I'm a little bit biased, so I might have to give this one to you, Adam. But I'd have to say my team.
It's very close. I think this week, Zach's team. Next week, triple McLaren with Mercedes is going to be quite nice. And especially, I think you go with Zach's team this week, pivot to that team next week. Then you have a for Coda where you can use the extra DRS. Then you're really cooking. Hakan, you want us to show our own teams? Here's Zach. Piastri, Leclerc, McLaren, Ferrari, and he can get away with it with only one Alpine. Did Terry post his team? I don't know if Terry posted.
Oh, yes. Let's have a look.
We'll do this live and see if he has a post up. He might be driving home from Aston Martin at the moment, though. Oh, we did.
Oh, nice.
Look at what we have here. It's the hybrid of our team.
I like that. This is the best for me. This is the best mini 4A light team out there.
So it's a very similar team to what I have, but he has Gabby over Colapinto, also carrying a bunch over. Looks like he's going to try to make that move for Singapore into a 4A and just wants to keep it stable.
Reese asked a good question about what's telling us Merc could be good at Singapore. For me, it's just historically what we've seen. Now, I know historically, even in 2023, when Sainz won, it looks like Ferrari were the fastest. But actually, if we're looking on actual race pace and where the Mercedes were at the end of that race, it looked like Mercedes had the pace there. 2024 again, if we get up the results, I believe it was pretty close between Ferrari and Mercedes. So I think heading into, let me get up 2024 results because I believe it was pretty close. Heading into that race, if we get a race where Mercedes are even on par or above Ferrari, you'd want to be going there. Like, how many points did they get? Hamilton. No, that's Mexico. Leclerc got 21 points to Russell's 19 to Sainz 18 to Hamilton. Oh, my bad. Yeah.
I was just going to say the theory behind why we think they'll be good is that night races typically are cooler. Cooler temperatures favor Mercedes. George Russell was doing really well the last few years of this circuit too. So all good reasons to like.
Yeah, Mercedes. I can tell you as well. In 2024, they scored equal points. So it's one of those ones as well where even when Mercedes are on par with Ferrari, you'd want to be having them in because then that frees up the likes that bring in potentially a Norris, potentially you could realistically run a lot of big budget teams. Like we haven't spoken about teams like this, but a Piastri, Russell, Albon team if Mercedes look good, which could be huge. Those sorts of teams.
Absolutely.
Lannister's talking about.
We're down to the last 3 minutes. We'll do a little bit of a lightning round. Rick, thanks so much for joining. Ooh, it does look a little.
I'm trying to see. I'm
definitely some wind blowing now. I'm watching the broadcast.
Yeah, I can't tell. Good luck, everyone. With the
racing. Says right now on they just flashed a weather thing on the broadcast, partly cloudy.
Oh, I swear, if we get rain, man. Lawson or Sainz, Mia, I would say it's equal between the two. So it depends if whoever you have in your team, just keep. Don't take a transfer to bring one of them in.
Agreed.
I would say no to the autopilot as well this weekend. I don't know. I don't think they'll be between Leclerc and Piastri. I just think it could be used better elsewhere.
Bortoletto or Lawson. Bortoletto?
Yeah.
It's close.
I think I agree on that. It does look windy. It really does.
Ooh, Greeny's locked in Piastri, Verstappen, Albon, Behrman, Hadjar, McLaren, V-Carb. That's going to be a fun one. I'm pulling for you, Greeny.
1 minute to go,
people,
everyone.
We have 1 minute. Lock in your teams. Piastri or Leclerc for last transfer. Stick with Piastri. Yeah, Duncan, lock it in. Lock it in.
I've got to make sure now that I'm locked in as well.
I checked earlier just to make sure.
Yep, I'm all locked in.
Phew. All right. Well, thank you all for another fantastic hour. Zach, Terry, and myself will all be back for Singapore. Good luck this weekend. I hope the DNF bug avoids you, and we'll see you all in 2 weeks.
Take care, everyone.